Thank you all for coming. Aloha, good evening. We have a really nice crowd, a nice feisty crowd. Looks like you're all engaged in deep conversation. So thank you again for coming. This gathering tonight really was kind of came out of a brainstorming session following our event where we had George K and Brad K come and speak at Honganji last year. And the Leipu'ala folks got in contact and said, we really want to do something that brings together the local Japanese American community and the LGBTQ plus community. And so the sponsors for Georgia K were also at the table, JCL, JCCH, and we thought we would have this event and bring together a panel of very prominent speakers, people that have done a lot in the LGBTQ community. And from our position at Honganji, it really is an opportunity for us to be visible in the LGBTQ plus community, which is so important for our community, our local Japanese American community. And as you could see by the poster board over there, there has been a long history of involvement, starting with Bishop Fujitani. And so when you have time, please go over there and read about it. And some of the people there on the poster are on our panel tonight. But anyway, I just wanted to thank you all for coming. Thank you to the groups that came together to plan this event. And now I'd like to, by the way, I'm John Matsuoka, I'm with Honganji. I'd like to call upon our friends from Leipu'ala.
Aloha, everybody. I'm Dean Hamer.
And I'm Joe Wilson.
And we're the co-directors of Leipu'ala. This is a community-centered history project, and our aim is to try to research and to discover and to uncover the stories of our diverse LGBTQ Mahu communities here in Hawaii, and to try to lift up those stories so that they're better remembered, and to mark them on our commemorative landscape so that they're never forgotten. And it was really through our research on that project that it struck us that it seemed like every time we got to a turning point in our history, that there was a Japanese Hawaiian voice that was involved. And this was true even before there was LGBTQ, during the labor movement and during the democratic movement in Hawaii, and then continued on, whether it was about marriage or about transgender rights or any of these issues, there were important contributions. And so we summed up some of those on the poster over there, and then we were really eager to share that information with others.
Another big, I think, honor for us in this project is to be able to be in contact with heroes of history, because as you know, in the work that you do, probably in your own family and your community, the ability of people to kind of stand up and say something at a time when something needs to be said, but many of us don't have the courage, it's those people that inspire more of us to kind of join in those efforts. And I think tonight's program and our partnership with the folks at Honganji, JACL and the JCCH are a real example of what that looks like and why Hawaii, we think, can be a model for the world. So we really appreciate you being here tonight, and we're excited about the conversation to follow. Aloha.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Logan. I'm here as a representative for the JACL Honolulu chapter. That's the Japanese American Citizens League. We, just real briefly, our organization, nonprofit organization that supports and protects the civil and human rights for all people. And so we think a lot about what that looks like specifically in Hawaii. And so, of course, when asked to join this project, we enthusiastically agreed, given in part the legacy of those on the poster, including past president and continued leader of our organization, Bill Kaneko, who will be speaking tonight. And so what we have, I think, is a legacy to be proud of, and examples from the past and ongoing kind of present of how to show up for other people. I know that's part of the story that we tell when it comes to the marriage equality kind of struggle in Hawaii, and the JCL showing up as an organization that's not necessarily focused on LGBTQ plus community issues, but definitely sees it as something squarely in line with its mission. So really happy to be here tonight. We have some information to share with you. If you'd come join us and talk story, we'll be in the corner. We have an annual membership meeting coming up, and we'd love to see some of you there. So yeah, come talk story with us. And I'll hand things over to Alina, who will give you some information about JCCH and the venue tonight.
Thank you, Logan. My name is Alina. I'm with the Japanese Cultural Center of Hawaii. First of all, I just want to give a big mahalo to everyone who made this program possible. John and Debbie with the Hompa Honganji, Joe and Dean with Lepua Ala, and Minza and Logan with JCL, our AV group. It takes a lot of hands to put on a program like this, so we're really grateful to be a part of it. And also, more importantly, our speakers tonight, Justice McKenna, Bill, and Aiden and Marsha, thank you so much for being here tonight. Ultimately, you know, we wanted to create a space, a safe space where we can have these conversations, these important and hard conversations, but also, you know, as a place to learn, to listen, to talk, and to celebrate. So we're just so grateful to be a part of tonight, and thank you so much for all coming and taking your time to be here. Thank you so much.
I am so thrilled to have everyone here tonight. I'm Debbie Kubota with the Hompa Honganji Mission of Hawaii, and I'm the chair of the Commission on Buddhist Education. But I'd like to have our Rinban Yuika Hasebe, who is the chief minister at Hawaii Betsuin, come up and tell you what the name of our event is tonight, Kagirinaki Ai to Jihi. You might be wondering, what does that mean? Well, Rinban Hasebe came up with the name, and I'm going to have her come up and explain that for you.
Good evening. Thank you very much for joining the program Kagirinaki Ai to慈悲 toward LGBTQ plus equity and inclusion in Hawaii Japanese communities. My name is Yuika Hasebe. I'm currently serving as the Chief Minister of the Hompa Honganji Hawaii Betsuin on Pali Highway. The title word Kagirinaki Ai to慈悲 means infinite love and compassion, which is quoted from the Metta Bhavana explaining the Buddha's compassion and love towards all beings. Traditionally, we use the term compassion, great compassion, for Amida Buddha, and love to explain human kindness and love towards others. In Hompa tradition, sometimes when you visit the temple, you will see the Buddha statue standing in front of the temple. Sometimes it is an actual statue made by wood. Sometimes it is a picture of the Buddha. Or sometimes you will see the kanji character. All represent the same Buddha, Amida Buddha, who is the Buddha of infinite compassion and wisdom. Amida Buddha, the Buddha of infinite compassion and wisdom. Why Amida Buddha's compassion is infinite? And why does it need to be infinite? I once was told by my teacher that Amida Buddha's compassion needs to be infinite because to save all beings, anywhere and at any time. No matter gender, age, ethnicity, disability, economic status, there's always a wish of Amida Buddha to save every single one of us without any conditions and any expectation to achieve. That is why the compassion needs to be infinite to reach all of us, to reach you and me. There's no place for discrimination in this compassionate teaching. I hope on this occasion of this program, let us take this opportunity to reflect that Our being is always embraced by the great compassion and share our love towards to each other. Nobody should cry alone because the great compassion is always there for us and the friends are with us. Thank you very much. Mama.
Thank you very much, Rimban Hasebe. So not only do we have a very esteemed group of panelists, but we also have some very incredible people as facilitators tonight, including Cameron Miyamoto, who is the director of the LGBTQ department or center at University of Hawaii at Manoa. I'm not sure if I got that exact, and then the second facilitator is Halen Dennison, who is the founder of Spill the Tea that serves LGBTQ youth. They serve over 400 youth, and they have something like 30 to 40 counselors. So anyway, I'll turn it over to Cameron, and he'll introduce. We're dividing this into sections, but Cameron will facilitate the first section.
Aloha. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this wonderful space of divine compassion and wisdom, infinite compassion and wisdom. What a wonderful way to be joined together tonight to celebrate LGBTQ plus equity and inclusion. Thank you. Thank you for your dedication to that spirit, to make things better for all of us here in Hawaii. Because that's what it's about for me. The divine compassion, wisdom, making things better for everyone. So we're going to be starting off tonight talking about ways that people in our Japanese communities in Hawaii have done that. We have some powerhouse leaders that I'm going to have fun to talk story with tonight, and we're going to have a chance to talk with them now. So I'd like to invite up to the stage Justice Sabrina McKenna. And Bill Kaneko. Okay, so I guess let's rewind and pretend we're back in the 1990s. Because that's when I first learned of these two amazing people. I was a grad student at UH Manoa, studying queer studies and Asian American social movements in American studies at UH Manoa. 1993, the Bear v. Lewin case happened. The director of the Women's Center at UH Manoa sued the state of Hawaii because of discrimination, because she couldn't marry, she couldn't be issued a marriage certificate to marry her wife. It went to the Supreme Court and they won. And it was deemed that that was discrimination based on sex. That was the impetus to start the marriage equality movement in the US. It took us 20 years to achieve full marriage equality in Hawaii. But because of pioneers here in our local Japanese communities, such as Justice McKenna and Bill Kaneko, so much has happened. And we're here tonight to talk about some of the reasons why we've continued to do what we do. So mahalo for your courage, your leadership, and your steadfast adherence to your values. So I'll start with you, Bill. I was wondering what motivated you to work on civil rights, inclusive of gender and sexual diversity in Hawaii?
So thank you, Cameron. So in 1990, I was 3 years old. But you know, I was born and raised here in Hawaii, and actually the first time I had ever heard about the Japanese American internment was taking the course at the University of Hawaii with Dr. Franklin Odo. And through that experience, I really got involved with the Japanese American Redress Program. And over the years, serving as JACL chapter president and working on the redress cases, I probably have talked to hundreds, if not thousands, of individuals about the discrimination that they faced, the racial discrimination that they had faced. And, during that time, I really had a lot of time to reflect on how human beings treat each other and discrimination. And obviously, racial discrimination is the same as age discrimination, disability discrimination. So I was really had really a lot of time to reflect on that and the similarities, whether you're gender discrimination or race discrimination, that's all the same. And it's really, a failing in how we are as human beings. So it really, having all that time to reflect on that, working on the marriage equality issue was really a natural progression in terms of the kind of work that we did by and through the JACL and for me personally.
Thanks, Bill. I mean, that's a really strong message that echoes, well, today with calls for solidarity and intersectionality, but then to tie that into the theme takes us to a different level. And that's just so interesting to know that we could look to our traditions in Buddhism to have that interconnectedness and that compassion. When I was a grad student at UH, I did happen to be a youth member of the board of the JACL of Honolulu chapter. So I remember some of the stuff because of the amazing foundation you laid down. So I was wondering if you could tell us what's the background that led to JACL being the first group in the nation to take a stand on marriage equality?
Yeah, so it actually, did start with the Honolulu JACL. As Cameron had mentioned, the courts had rendered a decision in '93. Allison Hikita Tasaka was actually the president of the Honolulu chapter at that time. I was the past president. I had then actually transitioned up to the JACL National Board. So I was a national VP for public affairs at the time. And, but through the good work of the local chapter and Allison's leadership and foresight, the chapter actually initiated this whole effort. And so at the local level, they became the first chapter in the country to support same-gender marriage. And when that happened, I got the call from her, because I was in the national board, about taking this up to the national level. So that happened actually in February of 1994. I got the call, and there was a national board meeting, so I made the motion to support same-sex marriage at the national level. And just by way of background, in '93, the JACL was pretty much in full force. I mean, they were very, very successful in getting the Civil Liberties Act of 1988 passed, a $1.8 billion redress bill that made it through Congress. There are some 26,000 members strong, 126 chapters all around the country. They were by far the preeminent Asian Pacific Islander civil rights organization in the country. So it's a very, very robust organization with a lot of success and clout. And so the national board was actually in its prime as well. I mean, within the national JACL, there are 8 districts throughout the country, and they're organized by regions. Pacific Southwest District, which is the Southern California area. There's Northern Cal, Pacific Northwest, Midwest, Eastern, but my point is that the organization scanned literally throughout the country with very, very strong leadership. And so the organization at the time, just completed the redress, Japanese American redress efforts. So they're feeling good. But part of it was, what does a national organization do when you spent literally 20 years advocating for Japanese Americans? So a lot of the leadership locally and throughout the country were looking for other civil rights efforts to advocate for. So going from Japanese Americans to Asian Pacific Islanders, broadening the scope of that, getting into housing discrimination, sex discrimination. And so marriage equality was a relatively new concept, but still like way out there, because this was 30 years ago, and really not talked about in the Japanese American community. But the JACL locally took that mantle and wanted the national board to take that up. So I made the motion in support of same-sex marriages, and it was seconded by a really good friend of mine, Trisha Murakawa, and we just didn't have the votes at that time because it was so controversial. So that was February of 1994. The next time that the board would meet would be in May of 1994, so there was literally 3 months between the first time and the second time. And that's when we started deploying information to the various chapters. We had a informational packet. We started making calls to the district governors, outreaching to all the chapters. But it was still very, very tumultuous time for the organization because it was, really just so far out there at that time. And so in May of 1994, the national board reconvened. And I was looking at my notes way back when, but the national board in May of 1994 voted in support of same-sex marriages, 10 in favor, 3 opposed, and 2 abstained. And so that was, historic. But on that same day, like what I tell everyone, like that's when all hell broke loose. I mean, the entire organization was split because the leadership voted yes, but the grassroots were just still trying to figure this thing out. And then we had chapters in places like the Midwest and St. Louis and Philadelphia, but in places like Salt Lake City, Utah. And so immediately after that, there was a motion to take this to the National Council of the JACL, which is like the huge organization. Everybody gets together, and that's where the public policy decisions are made by the organization. And, but kind of long story short, between May and August, was a lot of lobbying, a lot of outreach, and in August of 1994, that's when the National Council voted in support of same-sex marriages and became on record the first national organization, non-LGBTQ organization in the country. And this was before the NAA, before MALDEF, before La Raza, and I think even before the National ACLU to come out, and that's where it made its mark and historically, and became the first organization to support gay rights.
Thank you, Bill. Yes, thank you. I know that spoke volumes to my family because my grandparents, my father just received their redress checks. They were so grateful to JACL, but then they were curious about how could we make sure that this isn't just about us? How can we do something to help other people, and what can be next? So I know it was a difficult time, but it was really fueled by this energy, this compassion that looked towards more, compassion for others, and that it went for LGBTQ equity in Hawaii to start and to build a movement was so important. So thank you. Thanks. Justice McKenna, I was wondering, back in the 90s, what drove you to take a public stance on LGBTQ rights and eventually as the first Asian LGBTQ plus state Supreme Court justice?
Thank you. It's really an honor to be here. And, you know, just kind of going back a little bit, Bill Kaneko was partially responsible for me to be able to sit on the Hawaii Supreme Court because he and Governor Abercrombie and David Louis interviewed me when I was on the list for the Hawaii Supreme Court. So thank you, Bill. I know you played a part in me getting this job, so I'll never forget that. Thank you. So,
I don't know about that because the governor picks, but no, I'll take credit for it.
So in the early 90s, I had just left a in-house counsel position with a Japanese company, and I started teaching at the law school. And I started in 1991, and that is the year that the Hawaii legislature became the third state in the country to pass a prohibition on employment discrimination for gays and lesbians. At that time, it didn't cover gender identity expression, gays and lesbians only. And so then I was teaching at the law school, and that was the first time I felt comfortable coming out professionally, because up until then, as a lawyer or whatever, I was worried that I might get fired if I came out. But that law made a huge difference. And then when I started teaching at the law school, I was asked to serve on the Gay and Lesbian Community Center. And right when I started teaching was when Judge Klein had decided the Bayer versus Lewin case at the trial court level. So I started using that case, and what was going up on appeal. And I was using that case as my case for my law students in the appellate advocacy class. And it was amazing because some of the students were making the arguments that ended up winning at the Hawaii Supreme Court level. And so I didn't really have anything to do with Bayer versus Lewin getting passed, but this is a Buddhist function also. So I grew up in Japan with a Japanese mother and an American father, and yeah, I think Marsha remembers my mom at all the bone dances. She came here, moved here in 91, and died here in 97. But, you know, we would go to all the temples. So I grew up, you know, Jodo Shinshu, and doing all of the temples and all the bone dances and things like that. But I have to tell you, it was kind of sad because when I came out to my mom in 1985, you know, Japan had a tradition of being very accepting of all of this stuff. But Western influence, just like Hawaii, and she was not accepting of me at all when I came out to her initially. And it took years of like patience and I guess understanding and me trying to help her deal with me. So if the temples had brochures like you have now, if the temples were, because she was at Palolo Honganji, and if you had the materials and people were talking about this stuff back then, I think it might have made a difference because she felt like, you know, she's very Japanese and she didn't really felt like she didn't have anyone to talk to. So she spoke to me. I was the only one. But by the time she passed away in 97, she was much more accepting. I had a partner and she had a baby. She had her grandchild and she was just really, really happy. So that was good. But the Buddhist connection also, I did not do Bayer versus Lewin. I was just a law professor then on the Gay and Lesbian Community Centered Board. After Bayer versus Lewin in 93, we started the same-sex, equality movement. We're trying to get the word out. It's been a long haul. But remember that the one attorney that would take the case of those 3 same-sex couples, Dan Foley, he's Buddhist. Does everybody know that? He's Buddhist. So, he is the person with the infinite compassion And he is the person that had that. No, ACLU wouldn't take the case. Nobody would take the case. He took the case. So we owe so much to Dan Foley. And of course to my friend, then Justice Steve Levinson, who had the courage to write that opinion, and Chief Justice Moon, who joined him, and then my former colleague, Justice Paula Nakayama, who joined them on the motion for reconsideration to form a majority opinion. That took a lot of courage for judges in 1993, I assure you. And this movement, this did not just start the movement in Hawaii, it started it around the world. We were the first court in the world to rule that denial of same-sex marriage was a violation of a civil right. That was the first court in the world. So that's when I decided I wanted to be a member of this judiciary. I really, so then I was able to become a judge later that year. So I've been on the bench for over 30 years. But when my last position as a trial judge was heading the family court. And there I discovered really sad and terrible statistics, unfortunately, that still prevail. And I discovered that, LGBTQ youth are 4 times as likely to attempt suicide. But LGBTQ youth that come from families that reject them are 8 times as likely to attempt suicide than LGBTQ youth that come from families that accept them. And the statistics back in the 2000s were like about 77% of white youth came out to their parents. It was like 60 to 70% for blacks and Latinos. But for Asians, it was only 50%. And I knew why, because who knows the parents' attitude but for the children that live in their homes. And I was not surprised that I was rejected initially by my mother because I knew her attitude toward the LGBTQ community. So, but the other thing is like 30 to 40% even now of homeless youth are LGBTQ youth. But let me tell you, that is like a misnomer because the big chunk of that is our transgender youth and our binary, non-binary youth. And this is the problem of now. So when I was appointed, I thought it was really important for someone like me to be open because the media said, who's that woman and those children? And the woman said, oh, that's my partner. And they said, law partner? She said, no, personal partner. And then they said, will you be interviewed? And I thought, okay, I talked with my family and they said, yes, it's important for you to be open so that people understand that we are your neighbors, we are your judges, your doctors, your teachers, whatever we may be. And we live among you and we are people just living our lives and trying to live our happy lives. So please, be open and accepting and don't reject your children and don't reject your families. Thank you.
A closing question for each of you. Well, what do you draw from in your personal story or experience to guide your resolve to achieve social justice here in Hawaii?
I think for me, in kind of looking back at what we did with the National JACL, and really, one of my guiding principles, even professionally, is that whoever works the hardest wins. And I really believe so. When we, from the national board to the national convention, we worked our tails off in terms of organizing, reaching out to folks. We did a lot of interviews, op-eds, a lot of community organizing, and it paid off. You can't just take a position, send a couple emails, and wait for, hope for success. You really have to put your shoulder to the wheel and just start jamming it. And I think that, has been a very great lesson for me in terms of how I conduct my life professionally, personally, trying to, engage in community activities, is that you really have to work hard, and it's that discipline, it's that diligence that you take in your life, and as we did with the JACL, to be able to achieve success. So you can't just take a position and hope that it's going to happen. You just really have to work it.
Gee, I think it's just really important for all of us to be inclusive and open to everyone, differences in everyone, and just to be willing to talk to each other. Just personal things, like if you're doing invitations, don't say, are you bringing your, bring your boyfriend or bring your girlfriend. Just say, bring someone, and remember that coming out is a very personal thing and so you can't force people to come out, and don't try to make people come out, but just show in your attitude and your words and your actions that you are a person of infinite compassion and wisdom, and you are accepting of everyone. And I'm really, really proud of the Japanese JACL, that when that national made that that was huge. It was just life affirming. It was just wonderful. I'll never forget that. And I'm really proud of the Japanese American Bar Association also, which is based in California. But the Japanese American lawyers have really done a lot for civil rights throughout the country, and I think they were the first organization to endorse reparations for Black Americans also. So I think the Japanese community, please be open, honest, and remember the Buddhist values. Thank you.
Again, everyone, thank you to Bill Kaneko and Justice McKenna. We're going to be moving into the next section of our program for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll be inviting to the stage Marsha Aizumi and Aiden Aizumi. Marsha and Aiden are pillars of our community, the Nikkei community, in looking at P-Flag Hawaii, getting started here because of your inspiration. P-Flag is an organization that we'll hear more about, that's inspired by their journey as a family. With Marsha, most importantly, she says, as the mother of a transgender son. They are also the president, founding board member of the P-Flag San Gabriel Valley with an Asian Pacific Islander focus. And Aiden is currently president of the Pasadena chapter of P-Flag. Please hand over the microphone to both of them to do the next presentation.
Thanks, Cam, and thank you so much, Bill and Sabrina, for those wonderful stories and insights. Next facilitator will be Halen Dennison from Spill the Tea.
Aloha, everyone. I am so inspired and I'm so proud to be Japanese tonight. And I'm also so proud to have a 16-year-old son who is trans. I, 2 years ago, would not have been able to say that, but moms like Marsha and people like you here have really taught me how to become a supportive parent. I was born and raised ultra-conservative Christian. I wish I was raised Buddhist, but it has been a real challenging and long road, and I'm really, my only regret is that I was not supportive sooner. I think just like Justice said tonight, we are moving in the right direction, but our problem today is really about rejection of trans youth. And even with the political climate, all of our kids are extremely frightened and anxious. And we are serving now more than 500 youth at Spill the Tea Cafe, being 2 years old. So we really we really wanted to thank the community. We would not be here without your support. And I look forward to moderating tonight's discussion with Marsha and Aiden. So I'm going to let you all introduce yourselves. Aiden, would you like to share your story with us and get us started?
I'm like, is this on? Okay. I do want to, my mom would be very proud of me. I'm usually a wing it kind of a guy. And I wrote some notes because one, I felt very, I'm very honored to have been invited to be here with you all and be in this space. And so it matters a lot to me. And I felt like I really wanted to put my thoughts down for that reason. So thanks to the organizers of the event for having us be a part of it. I have slides. I have to do multiple things right now. So let's see if this goes. If not, could you press the arrow?
I can.
Fantastic. So I was actually born in Japan. I'm adopted. I was raised in Southern California. And for the first 20 years of my life, I identified, I guess, or the world identified me as female, and I navigated the world that way. And you would have found me pretty much in anything my mom dressed me in. So probably the most pink, traditionally girl attire that you could think of, I probably wore it. My mom, I think, dressed me in the things that were traditionally considered like girls' attire or clothing and accessories. And as I grew up, you could press it. Thank you. I knew around about the age of 3 that really was not my look. I very much gravitated towards everything that you would find in sort of the boys' department of a store, the toys that were sort of marketed and made for boys. And I started to be able to express that in words to my family and to my peers. And I'm very fortunate that my parents were pretty open to letting me express myself in that way. They let me wear, clothes that my younger brother was wearing. I participated in activities that at the time probably there was less girls participating in. And for the most part, I think I felt like I had a pretty normal upbringing. I didn't think of myself or see myself as that different from my peers. I had friends. I was very social, and I did pretty well in school. Probably not as good as some people would want me to be. At that level, I'm a solid 3.0 kind of guy. But I felt like I was a pretty happy kid. And then I hit middle school, and yeah. Technology is not my mom's best friend, and so that's fine. You can leave it there. And that for me was really where I noticed my peers started to address me differently. They started to point out sort of the differences in how I acted and the clothes that I wore and sort of how that differed from the expectations I think that society had presented to me and my peers. And so I started to have a lot of anxiety and struggled a lot with depression. I was having panic attacks every day at school. I was in the nurse's office all the time. And I was very fortunate I had an educator in my life that sort of took me in and created a safe space for me. But inside of my school experience, I was struggling, right? My grades were slipping. My already 3.0 grades were dropping lower. And I just was withdrawing from everybody, my family included. When I got to high school, which this is my only favorite high school picture, is I'm sorry if you can't see the pictures on this side, but it's me in my Letterman jacket. It's this red background. It is not the picture my mom liked where I was like this. Hate that picture. That's why it's not up there. But I came out my sophomore year of high school without really understanding that the transgender community existed. And I was faced with daily bullying and harassment from my peers, which kind of led me through my sophomore, junior, and senior year, kind of in that environment. And I got to my senior year of high school and I told my mom, like, I'm not going back to school, which my mom's an educator too. So I guess the 17-year-old Aiden was like, I'm gonna drop out of high school and my mom's gonna say, okay. And she did not. But I'm very fortunate. She was there to like advocate for me and worked with the school so I could still finish high school, right? And not everybody has supportive parents to be able to do that. And so I'm fortunate that that was what I was able to do, was finish high school. It took me like 3 years after that to figure out that I was not a lesbian, that I was actually a trans man, and that was sort of the missing piece for me. And I lost my notes. See, this is why I don't do notes, and I just wing it, and this is why I wing it. I will say I don't remember like spaces where I could be Japanese American and LGBTQ at the same time, which I know sounds weird because I can't not be both of those. But I don't remember spaces that affirmed both of those identities and those intersections for me. And so I remember spaces and messages around being like a good Japanese daughter. And that was really like a difficult thing for me to try to come to terms with and cope with, because I felt like I was being a good child to my parents, maybe not a daughter, but a good child, and that someone was telling me, or folks were kind of giving me the message that I wasn't. I know that as a trans like adult now, I wouldn't be here without the support of my family. You can click again. Thank you. And that, you know, in many ways, like, I'm able to do the things that I do now because of the support that I had, and that's why I feel like family support is so important. I was able to get married in 2013. She's gonna hate me for this. So to my wife, Mary, who's sitting right there. And, you know, outside of my parents is like my biggest supporter and my best friend. So I wouldn't be able to do the things that I do now. I was able to go to college, and I'm currently a graduate student doing my master's in school counseling. And thank you. And then I have the privilege of getting to do things like this with my mom. And really, I feel like the goal for me is that, or the hope, I guess, or the goal is that we're able to continue to like build bridges with folks, to have these conversations, and hopefully help people to find like more love and support and acceptance for LGBTQ plus folks. So I'm gonna pass it to my mom.
Thank you so much, Aiden. You guys ended up crying already, and that's only the first question. So, Marsha, can you tell us a little bit about your journey and parenting Aiden and how that was for you?
Thank you. What?
There.
Oh, okay. All right. Ooh. So, Aiden makes people laugh, but I tell you, I end up crying because when I listen to what he went through, when I listen to what he went through, sometimes I think I wish I could have been better, and I think when he came out, I wish I could have just embraced him and said everything's going to be all right. But the truth was, I went into the closet because I was both ashamed of being a bad mother, and I was sad because I didn't think our family could have a good life, and I was filled with so much fear. So that's where I started, and I think I want to talk about my journey from those feelings. Being Japanese, I was told to not bring dishonor to my family. And I felt like I had not guided my child to be what I thought was straight, and that's who he was supposed to be. But it's so interesting, when I started my journey, I didn't know very much about the LGBTQ community. And so, but I knew that I loved my son, or my child. And so what I did was I just came to terms with some of these feelings of shame. When Aiden was placed in my arms at the airport, I thought to myself, he's adopted, and I want him to have the best life that he could possibly have. And so as we were going through our journey, I struggled because I felt like I wasn't a good mother. And I wanted to be, more than anything, a good mother. Shame was a really big thing for me. Sadness, I was sad. We were rejected by the church. We were going to a Christian church, and they had asked Aiden to leave. And I thought it was the one place, because they talk about God being loving and loving everybody, but it was the one place I thought that our family could have a community. And so when he was asked to leave, to me it translated into God does not love us. And so that was really devastating to me because he was struggling in school, and I think it was just a really difficult time. And everybody needs a community to belong to. And so that was the community that we felt let us down. But the main thing, I think, was fear. Was he going to find love? Was he going to find a good job? Was he going to find a place where he could be himself? And I think that was my greatest fear, and it's still my fear today, with all the hateful rhetoric and legislation that is in the United States. Sometimes I wake up in the morning and I just am filled with like despair, really. But I have to tell you, this is a journey, and that's where I started, but I want to tell you where I am today. So today I'm not ashamed of myself, and I was never ashamed of Aiden. But when I went in the closet, I think he thought that I was ashamed of him. But today I live in so much pride. My son, who gets up here and can speak with compassion and confidence and is humble, is not angry or bitter. I'm so proud of him. And I think I have to say I'm a little bit proud of myself as a mother because I have to overcome a lot of things, you know, to get to this place of pride. Sadness, in the beginning I was filled with a lot of sadness because there was so much of an unknown. But today I have so much joy. This is a picture of our whole family. Our family is so much more connected than I ever thought we could be. I think we love deeper. We appreciate each other. We appreciate moments that maybe in the past could have been, you know, we would have just lived through it. And then, you know, Aiden's younger brother is there, Stefan, and he's always supported Aiden, and my husband has been such a great support too. So this journey has connected our family. And finally, I think, although I do have fear still, I come to events like this and I think there's so much hope out there. There are people that are willing to come and listen to stories and learn about our journey. And so I today have hope. I have so much hope. And so this is a picture of Aiden and I. We were recently in an equality fashion show. And I got to walk with my son in a fashion show. It was just an amazing experience. So, you know, I want to thank you all for being here tonight because you give this mother hope too. So I'm going to turn it back to you.
Thank you so much. Aiden, how do you find strength, like with the political climate or with societal challenges or with difficult people in general? Any kind of advice for us, for the people here? How do you find that strength? Because I can see you and I'm just like, wow, you are really, really a really good son. Did you see how he gave the tissue and everything? We're all like, You know, Aiden, you're amazing, so please give us some advice on that.
Oh gosh. I have to say there are times it's difficult to, I think especially when you're talking about like difficult people or difficult situations. For me, I find the most strength though in like leaning back on my community. And so going to spaces like this that are just filled with like, you can like feel, right, the good vibes in the room. And, you know, spaces that I know that I am affirmed and I'm seen for who I am and I don't need to try to be somebody else. So for me, like if I'm dealing especially with like difficult people or situations or even just like my mom mentioned, just the political climate and legislation against LGBTQ plus folks, like I find it best to just fall back on the ones that I know like love me for who I am. Yeah. I think that's probably it.
Thank you. And so we are going to open it up for any Q&A in the audience. Would love to hear your questions and Marsha and Aiden's insight. So if you have any questions, just go ahead and raise your hand, and I can start with the first one, which would be like, what are some practical steps that we can take to foster better inclusion and foster better like communication, even talking about these things, because it really is still stigmatized today. And just like Justice said, you know, Department of Health, they just released a report for specifically transgender youth in Hawaii. And unfortunately, 50% of transgender youth have actually attempted suicide in the past year. And, you know, Marsha and I think we both feel that mom guilt. But what I really would like to say is that most of the kids in the cafe of the 500, their parents are much, much, much more like unsupportive. And so these are things that we face on a daily basis, and we're wondering how we can get the community and how do we destigmatize. You know, the only way that we really can remove stigma from any of this is to actually talk about it. I'll open it up to both of you.
Oh gosh. There's no pressure now, I guess, right? Okay, I'm gonna look at the question again here. So, practical steps. I really think like events like this are having conversations because I know for me, in my experience, these conversations aren't happening as frequently as you might think they would be happening, especially with the climate and knowing like the statistics that are impacting our communities. And to see a room filled with folks, I think it's like, this is the space that needs to happen. Like these conversations and spaces created to really like kind of be vulnerable and open, but also have like really honest conversations, I think is the place to start, because we can't do it by ourselves. You kind of have to have community and do it together, but it's hard to do that if people don't know where to start or don't know who else to talk to or don't have all the information. So I think providing education and information to folks.
Yeah, I would second that. I think that education was what helped me overcome a lot of fear. I had a lot of misinformation myself as a mother. In fact, you know, I thought being LGBTQ was a choice. You know, and my son was making a choice that wasn't good. But once I got educated and understood that it's not a choice, but it is who he is, and he has a choice to either hide that part of him or to really be his true self, I knew that I had the choice to make. And was I gonna stand up for him, stand next to him and really support him? So education and just, I think, visibility and voice in any way, like the church, the temple is doing things, JCL in 2022 passed a resolution on transgender and non-binary equality. So JCL is doing work in that particular area as well. And of course, PFLAG and OKIDE, these are just organizations that are out there to support. So I think those are just a few ways if we can be visible and lend our voice.
I've been asked to invite folks to please use this microphone to ask questions to our amazing speakers. So just go ahead, don't be shy. You might have something in your mind, but I'll just go ahead and get us started then. It's like, can you please just speak to something what do you do in your lives to spark trans joy?
I can go first.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Let me.
So I really wanted Matt to be here, but he is at Rainbow Prom tonight, which is the only queer prom in Hawaii. And like the people in the back there at Spill the Tea Cafe, those are actual volunteers, actual interns, actual kids celebrating every single month, having community events for queer youth. We have a community closet, so people are like wanting to explore new clothes, or maybe they don't have money to buy clothes or whatever it is. What's so joyful for me, sometimes I cry, is I'll see kids come in and then change into their affirming clothes, and then before they go home, they change back. And those are the things that spark trans joy for me.
I really like that. I'll be honest, even for myself, I think it is like some of those things that, this is going to sound really wild. So I'm very much a Disney adult, but I think I find it sort of almost like honoring the kid I didn't get to be. And so when I do those things now for like the 10-year-old version of myself, and I go and buy myself like a little Stitch figurine at, I don't know, at Target, I just feel like there's this part of me that's getting to like make up for that lost time. And so, it might feel like sort of silly and childish, but it, for me, I think is like for that kid that I didn't sort of get to be at the time.
I think what brings joy, trans joy to me, is recently we did a joint symposium on transgender allyship. And we brought together, actually JCL was there, was one of our co-sponsors, and PFLAG was there, and Okaidi. And just to see the number of people that were interested in the information and to hear the stories, it just brought so much joy to me that there are people that are willing to share their stories and be visible. And so that's what I saw was trans joy for me, Aiden.
Okay, any other questions? I'll have one more question. So how has the support from Japanese American communities influenced your journey, and what more can we do in this community to promote family acceptance?
That's all you.
Gosh, there's a lot of resources out there. There's an organization called the Family Acceptance Project, and they have posters that have helpful things that you can do and things that you can, hurtful things that you can avoid. And I think one of the things is if our families see these kinds of things around, I know some churches, maybe some temples have these posters. And so, I think families just need to know that there are other families out there, that they're not alone. And I think that was one of the hardest things for me in the beginning, was I did feel so alone. And feeling alone made me feel like a bad mother. But the more people that were out there sharing their stories and sharing things that they had done to be successful, it just made me wanted to be braver. And so I think just, once again, visibility and voice is so important for us in the community to show up and to really be brave and share our stories.
I also think visibility is so important, especially in this, the time is now. And it's really hard to be visible, especially when majority of the people don't understand having a trans child, right? Like, I think the stats are 2% of people are transgender. Transgender people have been around since the beginning of time in every culture besides America. And I think it's like 10% LGBT. And so if we are only 2% of the population, then why are we focusing so much, and why are we being so mean, and why are we being so hateful to this such a small population? What we need to do is embrace and be visible and show that, normalize this, and say, you know, I have people like coming into the cafe and the clinic and rebuking the devil and getting death threats, and it's not an easy job, you know, and sometimes we have a joke in the cafe where it's like we love the kids, but we don't really love the parents, you know, but to be honest, like if we really want to help the kids, we do have to change this narrative for the parents. We do have to, you know, share our stories and be visible so that we can give these kids hope, letting them know, like, you can be like this. You know, like, you don't have to, I'm sorry, but the statistics are really, really sad, right? Like, trans kids are highest risk for suicide, depression, houselessness, dropping out of school, prostitution, sex work, all of it. So I really like to emphasize my favorite statistic, which is that it only takes one supportive adult. It doesn't have to be a parent, it doesn't have to be a counselor. It can be just any supportive adult that will decrease that suicide risk for LGBT youth by 40%. Okay, I think we are...
I think there might have been one question.
I'm so excited for this question. Let's hear it.
Aloha. Thanks to all the hands that took to hold the space. A statement that's been burning in my head, this conversation I still dwelling on, maybe kind of connected to Cameron's question, but a little deeper. It was said there was a time in traditional Japanese culture where there was more acceptance. There was a time when Japan was more matriarchal, as with a lot of indigenous cultures. Had, you know, plenty of room in the gender spectrum. And so when I hear that, it tells me that, you know, we can talk about politics all day, but in this case, it's an example of culture being, you know, as a weapon. You know, given it's imposed by another culture, notable with caste or class, you know, sharp hierarchy. So my question is, it's a reflections on what are our cultural resources. You gave an example of cultural damage, right? You used an example of religion being used as a weapon, for example. Can you share us like cultural resources that, you know, build resilience and joy as well, specifically? Or maybe even think about the things that we need culturally to restore what was once there before, because it's not, when you put it that way, it's not like doing something new, it's like restoring something that we had before, right? So it's a question about cultural resources, considering that's what's changed and created this mess in the first place. Thanks.
Thank you. I can talk about that a little bit, because I think one of the things for me is I had to change the stories in my head. I had a lot of stories in my head that weren't correct. Like, you know, Aiden was making a choice. I have other stories about, I mentioned I'm bringing dishonor to my family because that was a cultural thing that I was raised with, and I had to see that I could go beyond that. I think my parents were incarcerated in World War II, and we were taught or told never to be the nail that stands out, you'll get hammered down. So I think many times I didn't want to do anything that would make me stand out in a way that was different. Of course, going to school, getting good grades, all that, you know, that was fine. But having a child that was LGBTQ or transgender, yeah, that was something I thought was not acceptable. And so you love your child, you want them to be happy, and you want them to have a good life. So I think I had to change those stories that were in my head and really push back on some of those values, like not being public with issues that are maybe not as acceptable. And I had to push back on that because I thought, if I'm not going to speak up, then who's going to speak up for my son? And there are people that are speaking up, but this is my son. And I want him to have a good life, and I want him to know that his mother loves him and is going to be there for him no matter what. So I just had to push back on not standing out and not speaking out. So thank you for that question, because it really reaffirms in my mind how sometimes we have to push back on things, to stand up for our children.
Can we give Aiden and Marsha? Oh, sorry, we have one more question, y'all.
Aiden, you mentioned that there was an educator that kind of gave you a safe space. And maybe by sharing that story, maybe we can learn more about how we can be a person like that for somebody else. So do you mind talking about that?
Sure. What's funny is it really didn't have much to do with my sexual orientation or my gender identity, but she just created a space for me that I could talk about things, and she really didn't. She didn't create the space. I kind of created it for myself. She just kind of helped be there to go alongside with me. I don't know if that makes sense. She could have been oh, here's all these things and here's all this stuff you can do to help, but it's she kind of let me sort of do that for myself, and she just was there to be I'll be here, you tell me what you need to make this feel more comfortable. And at that time it really was around my own anxiety that I was struggling with. But a lot of it was just listening to me. My needs are going to be different from another person's needs, right? Right, we all have our own ways that support will look for us, right? And so she kind of just let me explain to her, and then she would help me create that space. So it wasn't that she created it on her own and then it just magically fit me. It kind of was I told her the things that I needed, and she helped make it happen, because I was, I wasn't sure how to do that part. It's I knew how to get to a certain point, and then I needed an adult's help or somebody else who had more resources or was in a better place to be able to do that.
I also like to share that when we present to schools and medical offices and things like that, that is a really good question, a very common question. And I even had the same kind of question hey Matt, why do I have to put my pronouns on Zoom? I get why you have to, but why do I have to? And those are the kind of uneducated things I would say. And my son told me Mom, okay, if you put your pronouns, it's just a sign to anyone in the LGBT community, I'm an ally. And I was oh, okay, then all, just that simple thing made me change all of my signature lines, or, because we know this population is struggling so much based on the statistics, just checking in on them. Hey, if you're a teacher, counselor, coach, if anyone's bullying you, let me know. Hey, I'm Miss Halen, if you need anything, come let me know. I tell the doctors that I work with, just wear on your lanyard a little pride pin. You don't have to say anything to the kid, but them seeing that, trust me, they will flood to you. So thank you for that.
Hi, good evening. This question's for Aiden. I have a trans daughter who's 11. What advice would you give her? She can hear you.
Okay. Also, no pressure. Advice, that's very broad. I think, gosh, advice. Let me think back to being 11. I think take in
words of encouragement.
Words of encouragement.
Going through her teenage years.
For sure. Rough. I'm
middle
currently
school, high school.
Yeah, I'm a middle school, I'm my intern right now for a middle school, so I'm working with middle school kids. Honestly, I feel it's looking for those little things to be grateful for and take in, and to pause and to take I think time to reflect on those things and look at the beautiful things around. I don't think I did. I got very stuck inside my own head, and I think when I was able to pause a little bit and look around and see the folks that I had in my corner, You know, not just like my parents as my folks, but like my, you know, like my teacher who was like my support through middle school, and like the friends that I had that really did stay with me despite sort of all the things that I was going through. I think looking back now, I think about those things, but in the moment I was like missing those moments. And so to kind of pause sometimes and just look around.
Again, everyone, let's give a round of applause for Marsha and Aiden Aizumi and Hayden Dennison. I now would like to invite Justice McKenna and Bill Kaneko to, oh, sorry, I didn't see you there. If you have a question.
It's okay. I was gonna ask, what is the biggest fear you have within the queer and Japanese community?
Honestly, I think it's just like rejection or lack of support. It's probably still my biggest fear. It's just that finding spaces that I can be Japanese American and being a trans person, and it being a safe and affirming space. So yeah, that rejection piece.
And thank you for that question, and let's please continue that conversation with Sabrina, McKenna, and Bill Kaneko up on the stage with Marsha and Aiden. So I guess for the four of you, just to acknowledge that there are some scary times right now. So what are some challenges, maybe uniquely to our Japanese American communities and LGBTQ plus inclusion? Anything you'd like to address?
Can I? This conversation really made me start thinking about this whole, you're probably aware that there's a lot of legislation around the country to try to ban transgender athletes from competing. And I just want to personally say how much I disagree with that. To say that someone cannot participate on a school team, everybody has all this stuff about, oh my God, a trans woman is there's so many people that say, oh, I really support the LGBTQ community, but not trans women athletes, right? And I'm so sorry, but you can't stop there, because in my view, when you start saying you can't have trans women competing, how are you going to test? Who's going to start getting tested? You know, it ends up, as many things, it ends up being racist, because it's the taller, more muscular women that are going to end up getting tested. And are you going to say that a trans girl cannot participate on their school team? I mean, I was an athlete. I played Wahine basketball. Athletics was very, very important to me. And if I had been a trans man and you had told me I couldn't play, well, maybe you don't care because I'm trying to play on a men's team, and you think I'm not going to be good enough. But when you have laws like that, there was a Netflix special, like Texas doesn't allow any trans high school athletes to play. So a trans man, boy, had to wrestle as a girl and was taking, was on some hormone. And so I don't know if he would have, beat all the girls anyway, but he ends up getting the, state title several years in a row. But, please don't take athletics away, because it ends up being discriminatory against people. And the other thing I wanted to say is pronouns are so important. How can you be supportive? Just as Halen has said, put your pronouns in your signature line. When we do Zoom hearings, it says Justice Sabrina McKenna, she, her, hers. And the Chief Justice, who is a cisgender straight male, has her, because he understands what it means to use your pronouns. It means I am an ally. And that's the other thing you can do, is you can have like nice little stickers, pride stickers or whatever, on your cubicle or whatever, or you just naturally talk about, now I'm sure a lot of people are going to same-sex weddings, right? Just say, oh, I just went to this wonderful, and both brides were so beautiful, or both grooms were so handsome, you know, or whatever, you know, just say it like naturally, right? So anyway, those are just some suggestions. Thanks.
Thank you. Our next question to the panelists is, what is your hope for the future?
You look this way,
My hope is that any LGBTQ individual can be accepted by their family, can be loved for who they are, can love who they want to love, and they can be safe. I just want Aiden to be safe. I mean, I still fear when he goes into restrooms. I also want parents to feel safe too. And some of the laws around the country that are taking away parental rights and saying your child can be taken away, you are an abusive parent if you support your trans child, or doctors can't help because they're afraid their license is going to be taken away. So I really do want safety for our LGBTQ plus and the parents, so they can love and not be afraid that their child's going to be taken away from them. I think that's it.
Yeah, I think for me, I'd like to see a lot more civility in our public discourse. I mean, our nation is very, very divided, and I get that. You know, there are folks on the left and the right, but how we've been approaching it during the past, 5-10 years is very, very venomous, and it becomes very personal. And I think that is very unhealthy for our country. It's okay to disagree on policy issues, but how you go about it, I think, is very, very divisive. And I think I would like a lot more civility so that we can actually work out our differences. And I think, we agree a lot more than we disagree, and we need to come together as a community to have these kinds of discussions in a very more dialed back way. And then in doing so, then you take the sting out of our differences. So I'd like to see a lot more civility in how we engage in these kinds of discussions.
And then for all panelists, what role can each of us play in creating more inclusive and accepting environments, both in personal lives and community settings? Sure. What role can each of us play in creating more inclusive and accepting environments, both in personal lives and community settings?
I think I've already said my piece on that. So anyone, please go ahead.
Gosh, okay. I do agree. I think the pronouns is a really easy or simple and effective way to do that and show support. But I think it is like having conversations with the folks in your lives, whether that's in religious spaces, workplaces, your neighbor, when you're out just on a walk. I think it's those conversations that kind of have like a trickle effect, and then, you kind of make, I guess, like helping to inform, but also having those conversations out instead of just in these spaces where I think sometimes we are all here because we have a lot of support. And so it's having them with folks who maybe are not as supportive.
I agree with that. I wanted to add, because I have to have many, many difficult conversations with my family and friends, and I think having those conversations and initiating them on behalf of the child is really important, because we can't expect a 10-year-old, 11-year-old, even 15-year-old to advocate for themselves, and saying, I respect your opinion, And I just hope that you can respect the way that I'm going to raise my child. And if you're going to say that my child's going to go to hell, then here are the things you can say to my child, here are the things that you can't say to my child. And I respect your decision, but if you continue to say my child's going to go to hell, then we will no longer be attending these family events. And so it's a really hard thing to do, but I'm really proud that over these 8 years, like, all of my family has finally come around. And then maybe we can do our last question, which is, what is your call to action for Japanese communities?
Well, everyone says this, but I think it rings true. You got to get involved. Get out there in the community. You need to vote. That's very key. You get to pick who your leaders are and what your policies are, and give money. I mean, that's part of the reality. I mean, you don't have to give a lot, but supporting political candidates and issues is just, that's the stark reality. So get engaged, and you have to take responsibility for, who's out there. So just really need to be very, very active participant.
I think traditional Japanese culture tends to be, as Marsha has said, deta kumi o utareru, a nail that sticks out, it gets hit down. And you don't want to create waves, and you don't want to be different, and there's this trend toward conformity. But I think it's important to speak out civilly, as Bill has said. When you hear an injustice, it's important to speak out. And, maybe when you go home or this weekend, you're getting together with your family, you can say, I went to this wonderful session at the JCCH on LGBT, the Japanese community and Buddhism and LGBTQ community. And, and maybe like start a conversation. And, I met this wonderful trans man, and he's happily married, and the mom loves him, and the family was so wonderful, and it was so wonderful to see. I think we need to educate each other and educate yourselves. Just Google LGBTQ history in Japan, LGBTQ history in Buddhism. Google and learn that this has been here, and it's still here, and it's going to continue to be there in the future. So let's just educate ourselves, and let's be open, and let's speak up when we hear or see an injustice.
Do you want to go? Oh, okay. Kind of speaking also to the nail that stands up, gets hammered down, I think that if more folks stand up, then we're all going to end up at that same level again, So I think when we get more folks to stand up with us, to speak out and say things, that's not one person now, isolated up there on their own for this rogue hammer to come and get. And we make those changes and climb together, as opposed to it being this kind of solo mission. So,
and I think everybody could do something. When you leave today, I hope you heard a story that touched your heart, and now you know a trans family, and so you can talk about that, just like Justice McKenna talked about. I just feel like when Aiden came out, if there was somebody there, if there was a church, an organization, somebody, I would not have felt so alone and gone in the closet, and I could have supported Aiden even sooner. So I don't know what each of you can do, but I just think voting, some visible statement that you can make, something you can do at your church or temple, something you can do at your organization, just something. You don't know the ripple effect of what you do that can change the perspective of an individual, a parent, or an organization. So I just hope you find something that you can do and go out and help us change the world so that people can be more loving and accepting and compassionate. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here.
Everyone, please thank our panel.
Okay, it's been a very full evening, a lot of information to process and digest. I want to thank again our panelists, Marsha, Aiden, Sabrina, and Bill. I want to also thank our moderators, Cameron and Halen. And I also want to thank all of the sponsors for tonight. And the AV folks. I'm sorry. Thank you so much, Dave and Darren. And Alan Kubota, the photographer. Before we mob the panelists, we'd like to take some pictures with them. So if you could give us like a minute or so to take some photos, that would be great. Thank you all again for coming, and please get home safely.
Good job.